We're going to go into how you can use the right exercises to increase size and strength. And we're going to start right now. Okay, so when we're looking at size and strength, we've got to think through a couple different scenarios. And we like to use benchmark lifts. We like to use lifts that transfer. Okay, so when we test athletes here, what we do is we test them essentially every 12 to 16 weeks. We put them through different systems of training, or our system, but we put them through different types of stimuli. And then when they go through these different training modules, right, we can then look at, okay, what did this athlete do over the last, let's say, 12 to 16 weeks? What movements did they do? And then when we look at the main lifts that they're training for, okay, then we can see if those main lifts grow or not. And so what this does is this provides us with a baseline for looking at what happens with strength. It also improves things like speed and explosiveness, but specific to this video, we're going to be looking at strength specifically and what movements really transfer well. And then we're going to be looking at, on top of that, size. Now, when we're talking about size, I think it's sort of like a cheat. It's almost like a cheat variation to say, these movements help with size when you're looking at the rep range, or you're looking at the age range of like 14 to 18. Okay, so 14 to 18, I can say front squats, back squats, single leg squat, all these lifts, cleans, you're going to get bigger, right? You just do those, like literally just do those lifts, you're going to get freaking jacked. It's the big factor here is size and strength. Once we get past those benchmarks that are like those milestone lifts, once we get past that point of being 18, 19, okay, once we're around 20 years old and we start hitting those milestones that are like lifetime achievement milestones, that's where we really start to see also the big size carryover. So I wanted to preface everything where when we're looking at this, the population that we're pulling from is, one, going to be middle schoolers, two, we're going to look at high schoolers, three, we're going to look at college athletes, four, we're going to look at professionals, and as we would term them, athletic fitness individuals. So we're really trying to look at what the size and strength carryovers are from specific movements. Okay, and then how that contributes to their long-term growth. And so when we're thinking about the right exercises, I think it's important to clearly identify like the pillar movements. Okay, so we're going to base everything around like back squat. Okay, we're going to base everything around bench press. Okay, and then a lot of you guys don't want to clean, but I'm going to challenge you to clean. There's some really easy progressions that you can learn, and we're going to clean. Okay, we'll have, we have actually a guy on site, Mike McElderry. He's 49 years old, can power clean 115 kilos. He's a big dude. And it's like, the fact that he can hit those nice big power cleans, it leads to some pretty good strength for him long term. So identify the pillar exercises. That's what we're doing first. We just did. Okay, and then what we do is we step back. We take a step behind here and we go, okay, here's the pillars. These are the most important lifts. And so when we're testing our athletes on site, as I mentioned, those 12 to 16 weeks, we take those lifts and specific to their sport, we identify the pillars for that specific sport, whatever they're in, okay, or that specific sport depth. And then when we take those specific pillar lifts, now we have these sort of offshoot lifts that we're looking at that they sort of feed it. They're these ones that, this is what you would term like transfer of training, okay? So we can see if a specific lift goes up, does this lift go up, okay? If a specific lift goes up and this lift doesn't go up, and we see that as a tendency, we see this as a consistent theme in our programming, then that movement has a lower rate of transfer. Okay, so the transfer of training is less, and then we sort of alter the priority of that movement. I gotta scratch my back. We alter the priority of that movement based off its lack of training transfer. Okay, so this has been going on since essentially 2008. In anecdotal sense, and then now since about 2016, 2017, really dialing this in our training system and how we see things flowing and what we end up looking at with athletes of all different ages. And so I want to get into the concept here of identifying those milestone lifts. Okay, so now we're going to go into these milestone lifts. So we have the pillars: bench, squat, clean. Okay, those are pillars, and we use those along with other exercises as assessments. Okay, then we have milestones. So a milestone would be you hit your first back squat with 135 pounds. That's a milestone. That's the first time you got a 45 plate on each side. That's a big lift. That's your proud moment. Like, I got the big plate on. Then typically, if you're older, the next milestone would be 225. If you're 14, the next milestone's 185 for a back squat. Okay, you put the chip on, you put that 25 on, and you hit that. You're like, wow, I got 2 decent sized plates on. Then you hit that 225. And then we look at, okay, what's the next one? Typically 250, 275, but then 100%, you're looking at 315. That's the next milestone, right? Then you're looking at 405. Now we see these milestones, 500 pounds, and you start to see the milestones happen, okay? So off of this, I want to just go back over this as quickly as we can. We have the absolute, like, 100% principle-based movements here, clean, bench, squat, that will carry over to all things fitness for the most part. You know, you don't need, if you're a sprinter or a distance runner, it doesn't need to be as high, right? But we're looking at specifically size and strength. That's what we're thinking about, size and strength. That's all we're thinking about in this video, okay? Size and strength. Then the next thing, we look at what exercises have a direct impact on those pillar movements. Okay, and then we're looking at milestone lifts. Okay, so when we look at those milestone lifts, now the next part is, if we know that the milestone lift is here, and we know that the principle, so the milestone lift is the number, we know the principle lift is here, a back squat, then we know the movements that transfer really, really well to push that. And that's where we're going to go right now. Is that the first thing that I want to show you is that when we're thinking about a 185-pound male and they can back squat 225 for the first time, it's their first day, and they come in and they're just training hard and hard and hard, and then all of a sudden down the line they're able to push that back squat to 225. They've got 2 plates on each side. That's a big achievement. That's a big accomplishment. That's something that we tend to see around 8th grade, 9th grade, on a consistent basis. You know, more athletic individuals, or maybe even individuals that are under tension earlier, like 7th grade, you'll see that pretty consistently as well. But the big thing there is that then we take that back squat, 225. Now we're looking at, now I'm going to give you these movements that have that high transfer of training. So we're going to look at front squat, okay? We're going to look at single leg squat. We're going to look at cleans, and we're going to look at deadlifts. Okay, so when you're at this point of back squatting 225, now we're looking at dead, single legs, front squats, and cleans, and we're saying, okay, based off of their back squat, these numbers typically, when someone hits a 225-pound back squat, these numbers here are the trigger numbers. And I like to think about the trigger numbers of these secondary lifts. Okay, it's almost like a video game. Like if we're in a training block, and we have an individual who's 9 weeks into their training block, and when they tested the first time, they only back squatted 185, and they have that their next goal is to hit a 225. That's their next milestone. They want to hit a 225. And then inside of the block, we have single leg squats, and we look at it, we're like, okay, when they single leg squat this weight, now we know they're going to hit that 225. And that's where this first graphic comes into play. Okay, so on this graphic, you're going to see a 225 back squat. Typically, you will have about a 180-pound front squat. Some people that will be higher on the front squat. Some people might be a little bit lower. On average, 180 is going to be like, all right, we're setting that up. Okay. Single leg squat, typically we'll see around 203 pounds. So between 185 to 205, that's where we're going to see that play out to be leading you into that 225 back squat. I'll actually use a great example here. Is that the first time that my son, so he's when he was 12, that was the first time he back squatted 225. He's got longer legs. Okay. So he back squatted 225 over 100 kilos. It's like 102. He single leg squatted just prior to that, like 3 days earlier, 90 kilos. Okay, so 90 kilos on the single leg squat. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, how do you do that when you have a single leg squat? You're using one leg. You're still pushing a little bit, I would say about 20 to 30% on the back leg, but also the range of motion is not as deep. Okay, so you can do that on the single leg squat. So when we're looking at front squats, it's 180. When we're looking at single leg squats, we want to work towards that 200 to 205 pounds. When we're looking at a clean, typically around 155 to 160. Okay, so now we're looking at 70 kilos, 73 kilos, somewhere in there. That's where you're going to be cleaning to have that 225-pound back squat. I know I'm sort of switching back and forth between metric and standard. And then finally, with the deadlift, you're going to look at like 236, okay, 235. Now, the other thing that we're looking at, these numbers can sound a little odd. These are literally like we're taking our numbers out of our maxes with our on-site athletes and we're averaging them out, okay? So if we have a pool that we're pulling 25 developmental kids that are middle school to high school and they just hit their 225, this research is coming from that. Okay, so we're going to look at this and say, okay, clean 160, single leg squat 205. That's going to be for a triple, and try and front squat 180. Okay, the big one I want to tip everybody on here is that when we're front squatting, if we just push front squats, and we've seen this time and time again, if we just push front squats, it's over. It's so over. You can push front squats, and when you push a front squat, the main milestone lift, okay, the back squat skyrockets. So that's like one thing I want to go over. So now let's go to that next milestone, which would be 315. Okay, so we're looking at 315 on the back squat, and we're saying, okay, on the back squat, if I want to have 3 plates on there, and if you can remember this, okay, I remember putting on the third 45. Okay, so I was probably 9th, 10th grade. You put on that third 45, and like the coolest part is when you would walk it out and the weights just are sort of like clanging back and forth. Like, that's a really fun feeling. It's like, yo, I'm freaking strong. I got 3 plates on this. And you see people like, even today, I will go to a public gym, and if I see a kid with 3 plates on, I'm going, okay, he's pretty strong. Like, that's a freaking milestone. That's a big time milestone that we want to work towards. And so we've got to, in the middle of that session, or in the middle of the training program of that 12 to 16 week block, we want to look at this. And the interesting part here is we had an athlete that just got an offer from Tennessee, RJ Cruz, one of his training partners, George Parkinson. So George just cleaned 270. Okay, so he's in 9th grade. He just cleaned 270. He's real tall, 6'4", 6'5" kid, very tall. He sucks at back squat. Okay, back squat is not his bread and butter. So we've been pushing his front squat quite a bit. So he hit that front squat at like 275 for a single. Okay, then he cleaned 270 because that's the age he's at right now. There's not much of a gap because he's just got to increase strength on his legs and his back because he's so tall. Now, he asked me, he goes, okay, we haven't done back squat in a while. What do you think I can back squat? Because the last time he back squatted, it was like 285. Okay, now he's benching 285. So a lot of this stuff comes back into like, all right, well, we haven't back squatted in a while. You haven't back squatted in about 8 weeks. Well, right now you just front squatted 270. So based off that 270, it's very likely you're gonna back squat over 315 pounds. So when we're looking at this, okay, we're looking at this information that we're pulling from. We see that milestone is 315. The pillar lift is the back squat. The transfer of training goes back to the front squat, the single leg squat, the clean, and the deadlift. Okay, so when somebody's hitting a 315-pound back squat, typically we're going to see 250 or a little higher on the front squat. On the single leg squat, we're going to see 280 to 290. On the clean, we're going to see 220. On the deadlift, we're going to see 330. Okay, so now we can start to play around with this in training. And the best part about this is that we're prioritizing the pillar lift. The pillar lift is the back squat. That's the priority. Okay, but then we're also prioritizing, look, if you hit these numbers over here on the triggers, if you hit these secondary lifts with these numbers, it's a trigger. And I like to explain it to kids. It's like going into a video game. when you hit this trigger in a video game, oftentimes this door might open up, right? And it's like all of a sudden when that door opens up, it's okay, I can accomplish something. I can get to that next level, through this door, and now I'm here. And that's literally what happens is you're hitting a front squat at a specific weight, and now the kid goes, oh, well, Dane said if I hit 250 to 270, I can probably back squat 315. So now the next time that we go to max out, even though it might not be for another 8 weeks, they already have it in their head. They're like, boom, I know what I'm going to get. I know minimum, I'm going to open up at 315 because I've already hit that trigger set. So here, when you're looking at it goes, I just want to keep recapping this because I think it's important. If you're like a self-motivated athlete, if you're a strength coach, these are things that you're going to think through. What's up, guys? Our podcast and our channel are sponsored by our own strength training app, Peak Strength. The entire focus of Peak Strength is to provide you guys with the absolute best sports performance app that you could ever imagine. We build out the programs on the back end. We take in all of these different decisions that we learned here on site at Garage Strength so that we can then apply it to you so you can improve your training. So if you guys want to improve your overall sports performance, head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store. Download Peak Strength. You'll get a free week of training, and then you can start getting on those gains, get those reps done so that you can become a champion. Now, let's get back to the video. Peace. Okay, so then we're going, what's the next milestone? Okay, pillars, secondary lifts, milestones, triggers. Pillars, secondary lift, milestone, triggers. Okay, that's what our next big aspect is going to be. So now we're looking at somebody who's hitting a 405-pound back squat. You hit a 405-pound back squat, you are freaking tough. You are a bad dude. You're somebody who's extremely strong. If you're hitting 405-pound back squat as a female, you're a top 1%er in the entire world. I know Anna's hit 180. I'm trying to think through our list. I think we would probably have about 7 women that have hit 180 to 182 kilo back squat. It's freaking heavy. Anna's also front squatted. I want to say it's 148, which is just shy of 330 pounds. And so that shows us when we're looking at the milestone of hitting a 405-pound back squat, we know that the pillar is a back squat. We know that the secondary lift might be the front squat. So when Anna hit at 148 front squat, and we have her also able to clean around 128 kilos, which is around 280 pounds, and we've seen her done clean pulls with over 170 kilos. Now we're looking at this going, okay, the trigger for Anna is setting this up really well. We're looking at she's pretty likely going to hit a 400 to 405-pound back squat. Now, single leg squat, you're going to hit a 365. So that's about 165 kilos. So this goes through the list, and you're going, okay, so if I can hit a front squat of around 145 to 150, I'm going to back squat 180 to 185. Okay, if I can clean 130, if I am cleaning 130, I probably need to back squat 405. And the cool part here is that oftentimes with younger kids, okay, so you take somebody who is 14 to 17, especially kids with longer legs, you might see a kid with longer legs clean 130, and they're not even close to back squatting 405 pounds. So they'll clean 285 about, and they can't even come close to that 405. And the cool part there is that as a strength coach, we can say, all right, this is a younger kid. He's explosive. He's got long legs. He just hasn't developed in the back squat yet. I think personally, I like to look at the back squat the same way I do bigger guys. It takes time to develop it. So now we're looking at that and we're going, okay, if this kid who cleans 285 can't even come close to back squatting 405, let's push his front squat, and let's push his back squat. And then all of a sudden, this individual takes that back squat, and they're now hitting, when they push their back squat, they now hit that back squat closer to 405, and it actually pulls their clean up. So that's where we start to get really unique with everything. And that's like one thing I want to go over when we're looking at somebody who's back squatting 500 pounds. I'm going to share a story of a linebacker who plays at Villanova. His name's J.R. Strauss, okay? So J.R. came in, and he trained with a training partner named Cameron Stewart. So Cameron plays at Rutgers, transferred to Temple, DN. Both of these guys are tall, okay? Both of them had terrible back squats. And I had said to them, look, if you want to play D1 ball, like we need to make sure that when you guys go into the season, you're hitting like close to 500 pounds because one's a linebacker, one's a D end. We've got to get you close to 500 pounds so that we're ready for football. Okay. So we went on a program. We created a program where they squatted basically every single day that they came into the gym. And it ended up being like this culture thing where now all of a sudden, they were squatting every single day, and it was like they were different from everybody. They were over there squatting, and everybody else was doing, their normal lifts. They were training when Nick Singleton was training. The interesting part here was that when we started this, okay, their back squats were around 420. JR could clean about 130 kilos, so he was looking at like 285, 280, 290 about on the clean. So we go 12 weeks. We're focusing on nutrition too. We're trying to get them bigger. We're trying to increase size, right? We're trying to look at increasing that strength in the squat. We're trying to increase size, so they're going to eat quite a bit more. So now all of a sudden, 12 weeks later, we test them, 500 pounds. Okay, well, they hit a 500-pound back squat, both of them. And it, like, pretty convincingly, okay? So typically what we do is we would test clean, then back squat. But I wanted to test their back squat because that was a priority. That was on a Monday. Then we had a clean session on a Thursday, okay? So JR had started right around 290, okay? So now what happens? We know he hit that 500-pound back squat, and I'm like, what is he going to clean? And he's been repping like 315. I think he might clean 335, somewhere around that. JR comes in, warms up, gets everything moving. All of a sudden, he cleans 155. That's 341 pounds. So his clean went up almost 50 pounds simply because his back squat hit that 500. So again, we're looking at the pillar lift is the back squat. And the reason why we use this as a pillar is it can pull the other lifts up. Okay? That's why it's the pillar. The other lifts feed. They're the secondary lifts. Okay? And then we look at the milestone. We want him to hit 500. Okay, so if we want him to hit 500, then the trigger is to hit 500 in the pillar. The secondary lifts have to get here. So you almost play this game of connecting like 1 with 3 and 2 with 4, and now all of a sudden he's cleaning 340. His secondary lifts go up because we focus on the priority, the main lift, the pillar lift, which is the trigger set now here at 500, gets us that big PR in the clean. It's a really simple system that leads to better performances. And so it really ends up being, we're looking at somebody on this chart here where we're looking at this back squat triggered. So when we're looking at the totality of everything, we're looking at it going front squat, single leg squat, clean, deadlift. We know these are the secondary lifts. We know the milestones are 225, 315, 405, 500. And then we know the trigger points with every single lift off of that. Okay, so now you guys can take this and be, all right, well, let's just focus on these lifts. This is the other big factor is if we're just dialed in on cleans, maybe deadlift, but I would rather just be cleans, front squats, back squats, single leg squats. Guess what? Focus on them till you hit the milestones of like 405. And then you use accessory movements like a reverse hyper, glute ham, whatever it is that you're using inside peak strength, and that's all you're focused on. Okay. That's back squat. The next one, we're going to go into cleans and we're going to go into benches, okay? So when we're looking at cleans and benches, it's the same principle, okay? So I'm going to go into cleans first, and we're going to see, all right, if we're hitting a big clean, what's the example? What are we looking at? And the big thing, immediately, milestone. Big clean, 135. We got to have that blue plate on each side. Now we're going through, and it goes secondary lift. Front squat is going to be about 165 pounds. When the single leg squat's around 190, you're going to clean the 135 pounds. Okay, back squat, 215. You're going to clean 135 pounds. Okay, snatch is another movement. Okay, so snatch would be another secondary movement. A lot of you likely aren't going to snatch. Okay, I think there's very simple progressions that you can learn, that you can use in your warm-ups, that you can perfect over 6 months and get very good at snatching. And when you get good at snatching, your bench will go up. You will have way more stable shoulders, which will lead to a bigger bench, stable triceps, which will lead to a better lockout. I recommend using the snatch progressions as a warm-up, but if you don't, you're still pulling from a front squat, a single leg squat, and a back squat. A lot of you want to not do front squats, But if you do front squats, you're going to get bigger. You're going to get stronger. So now we're looking at, that's 135 pounds. We're going to front squat 165. You can hit that 165 front squat and know, all right, I can probably clean 135. That's a great lift for a kid who's in 7th, 8th, 9th grade, and you're trying to really become a better athlete, a much more explosive athlete. Now, the next point, the next milestone is going to be 225. You got 2 blues on, or if you're in the weightlifting world, you got a red and a yellow. Okay, you got a big red, big yellow. Those are big lifts, and it's like when I got my football guys, when we go, okay, big red, big yellow, they all know, like, okay, this is 225. This is where they got to start trying. So this is a really, I really think the sooner that you can get to the 100K to 225 pound clean, the freakier you're going to be long term. Like literally, it's a race to 225. And I'll always bring up Nick Singleton. So he could clean 300 pounds. It was 290 when he was in 8th grade. And the reason was we literally cleaned constantly, like just constantly. We wanted a race to 225, a race to 315, because the sooner we can imprint that and get him to that point, to that milestone, that becomes his structure. Okay. He's going through puberty at this point. So you're 7th, 8th, 9th grade, and you're just normalizing 225 for that entity. And now all of a sudden, when he's 20 and 21 years old, he's not even thinking about 315 as a work set. It's just normal for him to hit that. Okay. So that's the whole goal, is setting up these secondary lifts as really, you got the pillar, you got the secondary. That's all we got to focus on. You get to 225, you want to, on a clean, you front squat 270. Okay, so when you front squat 270, you'll hit 225. Now, I use the example with George where we talked about George hitting 270 clean, and his front squat and back squat aren't that good. So now we know if we push his back squat, his clean's going to blow up even more. Single leg squat, you're going to hit 315 for reps. Okay, we also see, and this goes back to one of these trigger points, is that 315 is literally, if you have a 315 pound single leg squat triple, and we do these all the time here, okay? Every single test that we work through, it's a 90 to 92% likelihood that you have a 30-plus inch vert. 90 to 92, depending upon when we've tested, okay? So sometimes it might be around 90 coming out of football season. Right before football season, it's at 92% because everybody's in peak condition. Right after football, people aren't as strong. So that's crazy. That's a huge turnover. That's a huge carryover. So then you're looking at this and you go, okay, if you can clean 225, right, I can back squat 365, okay, and I should be snatching 170 pounds. So now I'm going through, okay, when I back squat 365, it's very likely I'm going to clean 225. Now, at a gym like ours where we clean very, very frequently, oftentimes we'll see the back squat number on frequent cleaners, people who clean all the time. That back squat number might be a little bit lower relative to their clean because we're prioritizing the clean and the front squat so much. So just bear in mind. Now, when we're looking at general pop, who might only clean once a week, maybe max twice a week, it's going to separate a little bit more. But these are the numbers that you want to hit as 225. And now you're looking at the right exercises for size and strength. Okay. Now, next thing we want to get into right here. There we go. Okay. Now, when we're looking at 315 clean, I want to really, really, really impress the fact that when you go from 225, the milestone on cleans, I think you're typically going to see a milestone at 225, at 275, and 315. And I would probably put 300 in there as well. When you clean 315 for the first time, you're a savage, okay? Period. It's 100%. You're in that realm now. You're in the realm of like you're cranking 315, you're moving it fast, you're catching it, you're a dog. Okay? And I want to just totally just hammer that point home. That group with JR and Cameron and Nick, we had a kid, John, who played at Ithaca, still plays at Ithaca right now. I still remember the first time he cleaned 315. Everybody was going absolutely crazy. And that's the other thing here is like when you see 315 on the plates, you're like, dude, he's going to clean it. He's not deadlifting it. He's not squatting it. He's not benching it. He's cleaning it. It's fast. You're moving heavyweight fast. And the thing is that creates that culture. And that's where we knew John in this case was at this point because of his back squat. Now, the thing I would say is his back squat was just around like 420 to 430. Okay, we would do power snatches. He could power snatch around 95 to 100 kilos. Okay, so around 220. We knew his single leg squat was big. We knew based off of his front squat, he could hit that 315. So the front squat is really the big trigger going into that 315 clean. Okay, so here, like, I just want to hammer home that, like, when you hit a weight like that, it literally opens up the door for your perception of explosiveness, your perception of power, and just your aggression, because it is such a cool feat to achieve. And so we're looking at a 370 to 380 front squat, and you're going to smack that 315 clean. Now, we'll have kids that are more explosive that don't do a full clean. They might power clean 315. But if we're hammering these lifts and you're getting really good with the back squat, now all of a sudden you're destroying a 315-pound clean. Now we're looking at a 405-pound clean, okay? This is the clean point that is like, dog, 0.5% of the population, if that, can do this. And the big factor I would say is that when you can front squat 220, I'd say, 220. I mean, DJ actually had a front squat of 220 and he could clean 200 kilos, but he was a different beast. Most individuals that can hit a 220 to a 230 front squat, so that's around 480 to 500 pounds, will smack a 405-pound clean. Back squat, you got to push that to 250 kilos, 260 kilos. So we're looking 575, 265 kilos. That's basically going to guarantee a sports performance athlete to smack this. Snatch should be 300 pounds, okay, 310 pounds. And now we're looking at it and you're going, dude, you're ripping 4 plates and you're smoking them. And the thing here is interesting is that we'll have like the anti-cleaners, and with you guys that are anti-clean, I'm always like, okay, so just tell me this. If you want to get big, like, dude, you want a big back, big traps, big quads, right? Like, you want them. Yeah. Okay, so you're going to tell me if I can get to the point where I got 4 plates on the bar and I can move that to my chest in one movement fast, I'm not going to get bigger and stronger? You really want to tell me that? And then let's say this. Have you ever seen somebody who can clean 405 and he's not big? Like, I asked this question, and I have Ryan McDonald who can clean 405 and he's sort of skinny, but for his body type, relative to when he could only clean 300 pounds, he's way bigger. You're never looking at a kid who can clean 405 pounds and be like, yeah, he's not that strong. He's not that big. They're all big because you got a freaking front squat heavy. You got a single leg squat heavy. You have to back squat heavy. And if you're pushing those pillar lifts, now the milestone's 405, guess what? You're big, you're strong, you're fast, you're explosive, you're a freak, you're a savage on another planet, from another planet. So this is going to be that long-term clean trigger sets. And this is where I really want to, like, push you guys to think through these trigger points, as like, it really hammers home we don't need as much variety as we think, okay? And I like variety more so in our hypertrophy movements, okay? So our accessories. So I like variety more so in our hypertrophy movements, our accessories. I'm looking at that's where the variety can come in, because you can isolate muscles very specifically in very specific ranges and provide very specific tension. I don't want as much variety on the pillar lift, and I don't want as much variety on the secondary lift. And it's like, if we're looking at this and we're going, if you clean freaking 405, you're just cleaning, front squatting, back squatting, single leg squatting, snatching. You might do some clean pulls. That's 6 lifts that you just dial in on with your legs. You will still have your hypertrophy work, your accessory work also that you can couple in on this. And then we just get creative with your rep schemes. and your periodization. Okay, that's what we're doing in peak strength with everything, is we're laying that out so that you can attack these things as eloquently as possible to develop peak strength. Now, if we're looking at, we have here a 450-pound clean, that's achievable by very few individuals. So we do have numbers there, and those numbers are legit. 240-pound, a 240 kilo front squat, which is our gym record is 242, I believe. Single leg squat, our gym record's 250 kilos from Lucas. Our back squat here, 640. So our back squat gym record is, I want to say 6'9". Oh no, Swole Kyle just hit 720. Our power lifter. Okay, so we're looking at these and we're going, all right, well, I'll share an example here. If I'm immediately looking at a 450-pound clean, okay, that's right. That's like 205 kilos. Sam Mattis smacked 200-kilo clean, and his single leg squats and back squats and snatch dial in almost perfectly here. Okay, DJ, Russell Bowman, these are other two guys that have cleaned over 450. Russell's front squat is actually not that heavy. It's not that high. His snatch is actually that high though. Okay, so you start to see like some athletes respond well to specific secondary lifts, and that's where you can get very, very into the fine line of like, all right, this person responds well to more strength-based secondary lifts. This person responds better to more explosive-based secondary lifts. And then you can play this game to sort of get them to grow over this, 5 to 10 years to get them to the level that we need them to be to become the best version of themselves. Now I want to get into the bench, okay? I want to go into those bench trigger sets. Okay, so when we're looking at the bench, big milestones, okay, bench is the pillar movement. The milestones tend to be 135, 225, 315, 405, 500, okay, for dudes. And then we're looking at the secondary lifts. The secondary lifts tend to be incline bench, dumbbell bench, dips. A lot of people don't do dips heavy. I recommend doing dips heavy. I do recommend getting a V-bar for the dips. You'll feel a little bit more comfortable on them. But we've got to focus on now, what can we do on our dumbbell bench to hit a 225? What can we do on our incline bench, on our dips? And if we're looking at incline bench, if we're hitting 5 reps, typically that's going to be about 155 pounds if we want to bench 225. So as soon as a kid hits about 155-pound 5-rep max, we're going on the incline, we're going, okay, he's probably pretty freaking close to that 225. And we can start to get it in their head that, hey, you're probably able to bench 225. And they might be on a program where they're just incline benching and doing dumbbell benches. So then when they're doing dumbbell benches, we're hitting 85s for 5, okay? Now we see the trigger sets are incline and dumbbell bench, and the reps are here, and they're starting to line up, and we're going, okay, you're pretty freaking close to 225. And they might be like, I don't know. They might have had, scares in the past where they put 2 plates on and they don't want to do it. They're a little concerned about it. But what ends up happening is that because we've set this up and we've explained the pillars, the secondary movements, the milestones, and then the triggers, now they start to believe it. And then guess what? We put on the 2 plates and they smack it. And then when the dips, we're looking at, if we have a 200-pound dude, he might have 120 pounds on there and he can hit that for a triple. Well, guess what? He's now able to do that on bench. Okay, so we're looking at this and we're going, okay, incline bench is more shoulders, upper pec, actually all pec. Dumbbell bench, more triceps. It's going to improve stability. Dips, a lot of triceps. It's basically like a decline with a crazy range of motion, and it's going to lead to that big time 225. Now, when we're going into 315, now all of a sudden, if we're analyzing a lifter and they want to bench 315, this is the same feeling that you get when you squat 315. You take it off and it's just like, the weights are clanging back and forth, even with the spring collars on, and you're just going, like, people across the gym are looking at you, like, yo, that dude's benching 315, and maybe it's the first time you're doing it. And you're crapping your pants as you lower through the eccentric. But you know that you can do that because you've hit a 5-rep incline at 225 or 215. Okay, so if you hit an incline bench for 5 reps there, now all of a sudden we're in a good spot. 10 reps on incline, 185 to 205. Now you're pushing that really heavy. Now we're looking at, I always say, and so we're looking at 315. I always say if you can hit 100 pounds for 10 on dumbbell bench, you're going to bench 300. If you hit the 105s for 10, you can hit 315. Okay, if you hit the 115s for 5, you're going to bench 315. So we really will focus on smacking big time dumbbell bench lifts. Okay, we want to push the weight on dumbbell bench, and that goes back to the trigger points. And then the dips, we are going weighted a lot. Okay, and now we're looking at this and we're going bench, incline bench, dumbbell bench, dips. We have 4 movements. The pillar is the bench. The 3 secondaries are going to be the incline, the dumbbell, and the dips. Those are 4 exercises for your upper body. This is not even including pull-ups. This is not even including rows or accessory movements. Like, we're just dialing in on those 4 main movements, and the pillar being the bench. Okay, now you get a kid to just continuously build through that, and they hit a double at 200 pounds on the weighted belt. They're going to be freaking tough. We're looking at, if we bench 315, strength is high, likely size. If you're that strong, you are not going to be small. Okay? Like, it's not going to happen. I'm telling you, it's not going to happen. Now, the next trigger point that we want to look at is that we want to try and get to a 405-pound bench. And when we're looking at 405, this is where the weights really start to get heavier, especially on the trigger set. So we're looking at incline bench 280 to 300 for 5. You've got to be able to hit a good standard there. Typically, the incline bench percentage would be starting around 80%. Okay, so if you hit that 300, and a 280 for 5 would put you 300 to 315. Okay, so now you hit that incline bench there, you start to think like, oh man, my incline's over 300. I might be able to hit 400. And then you start to correlate these things in training, and you can start to easily identify like, man, my dumbbell bench is much lower than my incline bench. I need to focus on my tricep strength here. And then you go on the dips and you're going, I'll share my dip PR is 315. And I weighed about 270, 275 when I did it. And I hit 315. That's over 500 plus total pounds. And I could bench 500 pounds at the time. Okay, so you can start to look at these things. And I would say that one of my weaker points is I did the 165s. I did for 13. That's my PR on dumbbell bench. I think had I pushed that a little bit more, if we had heavier dumbbells like 170s and done like sets of 5, 175s, I think I could have benched 550. But I lacked that aspect in my pecs, and I really, looking back on my training, I could have figured that out had I really had the dialed in trigger set system to promote where we were trying to go with our training. Okay, so these are the numbers that you're going to use for the big 405 bench. Again, this is a setup where what's cool, actually Jordan West just sent me, he's one of our online shot putters that lives in New Jersey. He comes out once in a while to train, and he just sent me a video of him speed benching 365 for reps. And it's like, when you can hit speed benches that heavy, you're 450 type bencher. And guess what? You're going to be you're going to have crazy size and crazy strength. And that's the thing with these numbers. It's all size, it's all strength. Now, we're going to get into let's look at one more here, 500 pounder. Okay, so when we're going into this, if you want to bench 500, you got to incline heavy, 350 for 4 or 5 reps. Okay, incline 295 to 300 for 10 reps. That's going to start to set you up with those big lifts. And this is one thing. When Taman first benched 500 pounds, I was pressuring him to push the 150s, the 160s more on dumbbell bench. Like, I knew, because he sometimes gets out of the groove with his shoulder to his tricep. Okay, so if you get better with your dumbbell bench and you start to push the 160s, 165s for higher reps, you're going to be more stable when you're taking that big 500 off. And actually, in the first time Taman hit 500, he actually missed it for the first rep and then came back and hit it on the second one. Now, I just shared that story when I hit 500 pounds, that's when I was hitting my PR dip with 315. Okay, so that's how I knew I could get that 500-pound bench. So this is the trigger setup across the board that you guys can now use, and you can take this for clean, you can take this for squats, you can take this for dumbbell bench, you can apply this into your own training. You can start to figure out, where are you missing, what are you struggling with, what are you doing well, And when you start to dial that in even more, you become a better athlete. And then you start to figure out what type of secondary lifts are we looking at. And that's exactly what we do inside of our strength training app, Peak Strength. All you guys have to do, head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store. If you want another video, click right here. Because remember, freaks, if you want to become a champion, you've always got to cultivate your power. Peace.